It's so easy to imagine the challenges when families separate, like dividing up their stuff and figuring out where everyone's going to live.
Yeah, the practical side of things.
But there's this whole other layer that's way more complicated and honestly kind of heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
It's when a kid's relationship with one parent starts to fall apart. And it's not just a natural drifting apart, but because of things the other parent is doing.
Like a deliberate effort to damage that bond.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving deep into today, this phenomenon called parental alienation.
That's right. We're going to explore how one parent can essentially manipulate a child into rejecting the other parent,
Sometimes even to the point where the child seems to genuinely hate the other parent.
and the impact of that can be devastating and long-lasting for everyone involved.
So in this deep dive, we want to give you a solid understanding of parental alienation, what it really means, how to recognize it, and the serious consequences it can have. We'll be pulling from a lot of different research and expert perspectives to really unpack this complex issue.
And it's surprisingly common. Some estimates suggest that millions of kids in the U.S. alone are dealing with moderate to severe parental alienation.
Millions. Wow, that's a lot more than I would guessed.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, and that's why it's so important to understand it.
So our mission today is simple: to give you a clear, thorough understanding of parental alienation, what it looks like, how it affects people, all that. So let's start with the basics. When we say parental alienation, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, at its core, it's about one parent, whether consciously or not, manipulating their child into unjustly rejecting the other parent. And it often pops up in these high conflict divorces or separations where emotions are already running high.
So it's not just that the kid naturally feels closer to one parent after the split.
Right, it goes beyond that. It involves a pattern of behavior where the alienating parent actively tries to damage the child's relationship with the other parent.
So they're intentionally driving a wedge between them.
Exactly. And they might do this in a lot of different ways, sometimes subtly, sometimes much more overtly. They might badmouth the other parent, make it hard for the child to see them, or even fabricate stories to make the other parent look bad.
And over time, all of that can lead to the child actually believing those things and rejecting the targeted parent.
Right.
Now, you often hear the term parental alienation syndrome, or PAS, thrown around. What's the story with that term?
So PAS was first coined by a psychiatrist named Richard Gardner back in the 1980s. He described it as this condition in kids where they've been so influenced by one parent that they develop this intense, almost irrational hatred for the other parent.
And it's not just a mild dislike, it's like full-blown hatred.
Yeah, it can be really extreme. And Gardner said this hatred would often spill over to the rejected parent's family too, like their grandparents or aunts and uncles.
It's like the child is completely rejecting everything associated with that parent.
Exactly. But there's a really important point that Gardner made about diagnosing PAS.
Okay, what's that?
He said it should only be considered when there's absolutely no history of abuse or neglect by the rejected parent that could explain the child's feelings.
So if there was actual abuse, then the child's negative feelings would make sense, and it wouldn't be considered PAS.
Right. It's crucial to distinguish between a child reacting to genuine harm and a child being manipulated into rejecting a perfectly loving and safe parent.
So it seems like there's a distinction between PAS, which focuses on the child's supposed syndrome, and the broader concept of parental alienation, which is about the parent's behavior.
That's a really important distinction. Parental alienation, in this wider sense, is about the strategies and actions a parent uses to intentionally harm the child's relationship with the other parent.
It's like they're playing mind games with the child to turn them against the other parent.
Yeah, some experts have described it as a form of emotional manipulation, a head trip designed to distort the child's reality.
Now, I know this whole topic of parental alienation can be pretty controversial.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really hotly debated area.
What are some of the main points of contention?
Well, those who believe parental alienation is a serious problem see it as a form of child abuse because it can cause such significant and lasting emotional harm to children.
It's like they're being emotionally abused by the alienating parent and then also robbed of a relationship with the other parent.
Exactly. But then there are those who are concerned that the concept of parental alienation could be misused to dismiss legitimate claims of abuse or domestic violence.
So they worry that it could be used as a weapon to silence victims and protect abusers.
That's the fear. It's a very delicate balance, trying to acknowledge the harm of parental alienation without minimizing or invalidating genuine instances of abuse.
And what do the big psychiatric organizations say about PAS as an actual syndrome?
While major organizations like the American Psychiatric Association, or APA, haven't formally recognized PAS as a mental health disorder in their big diagnostic manual, the DSM-5.
So it's not an official diagnosis.
Not yet. And other organizations like the World Health Organization and the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges have also expressed reservations about PAS, mainly because of the complexity of family dynamics and the potential for misinterpretation.
So even though it's not an officially recognized syndrome, it doesn't mean the behaviors themselves aren't happening or that they're not harmful.
Exactly. The debate about the label shouldn't overshadow the fact that these patterns of behavior are real and can have serious consequences for kids.
And we're seeing more and more attention being paid to parental alienation in legal settings, particularly in custody disputes.
That's right, some courts are starting to take it seriously and recognize the potential harm it can cause.
So while the debate about the syndrome continues, the underlying actions are being increasingly acknowledged.
Right.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about those actions. What are some specific things an alienating parent might do?
Well, the behaviors can range widely, and as we've said, they can be deliberate or even unintentional, but the effects on the child are often similar.
Okay, so let's break down some examples.
One common tactic is constantly bad-mouthing the other parent to the child.
Like saying things like, your dad doesn't love you, or your mom is a terrible person.
Exactly. And for a child, especially a young one, hearing that from their parent can be really confusing and upsetting. They might start to believe those things even if they have no evidence to support them.
It's like the alienating parent is poisoning the well, making it hard for the child to see anything good about the other parent.
That's a good way to put it. And sometimes the alienating parent will go beyond just words. They might get into legal battles, making false accusations of abuse or neglect, or calling for unnecessary welfare checks on the other parent.
So they're trying to use the legal system to make the other parent look bad and gain control.
Exactly. These actions create the impression that the targeted parent is unstable or even dangerous, which can be incredibly damaging to the child's perception of them.
It's like they're building a case against the other parent, even if it's based on lies.
Right. And it's not always limited to the legal system. They might also badmouth the other parent to friends, family, teachers, anyone who will listen.
Spreading those negative stories far and wide.
Yeah, it becomes this constant campaign to undermine the other parent's reputation and make the child question everything about them.
It sounds exhausting for the targeted parent to constantly be fighting against that.
Absolutely. It can feel like an uphill battle, and it takes a huge toll emotionally.
Now, what about some of the less obvious ways this alienation can play out?
Well, sometimes it's about creating obstacles to the child, seeing the other parent, making it logistically difficult or emotionally uncomfortable for them to visit.
What do you mean?
They might refuse to let the child take their favorite toys or clothes to the other parent's house. Or they might say things like, your dad doesn't care enough to buy you that, trying to make the child feel like they're missing out or that the other parent isn't providing for them.
Wow, those are subtle but powerful ways to plant seeds of doubt in the child's mind.
Right. And even something as simple as not having pictures of the other parent up in the house can contribute to a sense of their absence or unimportance.
It's like they're trying to erase the other parent from the child's life, bit by bit.
Exactly. And it can be really effective, especially over time.
Now, what about when the child is actually with the targeted parent? Or there are things the alienating parent might do to interfere with that time?
Oh, definitely. They might constantly call or text the child during the visit, interrupting their time and making it feel like they're not really free to enjoy themselves.
It's like they can't escape the alienating parent's control, even when they're physically with the other parent.
Right. And those calls might not be just casual check-ins. They might be filled with questions about what the other parent is doing, who they're with, what they're talking about.
So they're using the child as a spy.
Exactly. It puts the child in this horrible position where they feel like they have to choose sides or betray one parent to please the other.
That's so unfair to the child. It's like they're caught in the middle of a war.
Absolutely. And sometimes the alienating parent will go even further. They might tell the child not to call the other parent mom or dad anymore, insisting they use their first name instead.
Wow, that seems so cold and disrespectful.
It is. It's like they're trying to strip away the child's sense of connection and familial bond with the targeted parent. And in some cases, the alienating parent might even try to legally change the child's last name to remove any association with the other parent.
That's a pretty extreme step. It really shows how far some parents are willing to go.
Yeah, it's a real power move designed to erase the other parent's identity and claim sole ownership of the child.
It's like they're saying, this child is mine, and you have no right to them.
Exactly. And there are other more subtle ways this alienation can manifest. For example, an alienating parent might play up the child's medical needs, emphasizing their dependence on them and undermining the other parent's ability to care for them.
It's like they're creating this narrative that they're the only one who can truly meet the child's needs.
Right. It's a way to control the child and make themselves indispensable. Another tactic is reacting negatively when the child has a good time with the targeted parent.
So if the child comes back from a visit excited and happy, the alienating parent might get upset or withdraw affection.
Exactly. They might sulk, get angry, or even make the child feel guilty for having fun with the other parent. It's a way to punish the child for showing positive feelings towards the targeted parent and reinforce the idea that they should be loyal only to the alienating parent.
It's all about control and manipulation.
Exactly. And then there are the more practical ways they might undermine the other parent, like refusing to cooperate on schedules, making it difficult to arrange visits, or not sharing important information about the child's school or medical appointments.
It's like they're creating all these obstacles to make it as hard as possible for the other parent to be involved in the child's life.
Exactly. And even seemingly small things like throwing away gifts from the other parent or constantly criticizing them can contribute to the overall negative picture they're painting.
It's death by 1,000 cuts.
That's a good way to put it. And often, underlying all of these behaviors is a consistent message that the alienating parent is trying to instill in the child, that the other parent is bad, dangerous, or doesn't love them.
It's like they're brainwashing the child into believing this distorted version of reality.
And it can be incredibly effective, especially if it's done over a long period of time.
It's really disturbing to see how these patterns of behavior mirror tactics used in other forms of abuse.
Yeah, there are definitely some parallels to domestic violence and other forms of coercive control. It's all about one person trying to exert power and control over another, often through manipulation and isolation.
And in this case, the child is caught in the crossfire.
Right, and the impact on them can be devastating.
That's a great point, and that's exactly what we're going to explore next.
Yeah.
We'll delve into how all of this affects the children involved, the emotional and psychological toll it takes on them.
Yeah, we'll talk about the confusion, the guilt, the anger, all the complicated emotions they grapple with.
And we'll look at how those effects can linger long into adulthood.
It's a really important part of understanding the full scope of parental alienation.
So stay tuned, because we'll be right back after the break.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
Okay, so we've laid out what parental alienation is and some of the tactics alienating parents might use.
Right.
But now, let's talk about the real heart of the matter. How all of this affects the kids.
Yeah, this is where it gets really heartbreaking.
Because these kids are essentially being forced to choose between their parents, often based on misinformation and manipulation.
And they're often too young to understand what's really going on.
It's got to be so confusing for them. Imagine loving both your parents, but being told that one of them is bad or doesn't love you.
And they have no real evidence to contradict what the alienating parent is telling them. They're totally dependent on that parent for their understanding of the world.
It's like their whole reality is being warped.
Exactly. It creates this incredible internal conflict for the child. They're trying to make sense of these conflicting feelings, this love for one parent and this forced rejection of the other.
And it's not just confusion. They're also dealing with the loss of a parent, even if that parent is still alive and wants to be in their life.
Right. It's a very real and painful loss. And it's often a loss that they're not allowed to grieve properly.
Because the alienating parent is telling them it's for the best, that they're better off without the other parent.
Exactly. It's a very messed up situation. And the effects of this can be really long-lasting. These kids often struggle with relationships later in life.
Makes sense. They've learned that relationships are about manipulation and control, not about trust and love.
Exactly. They might have trouble forming healthy attachments, setting boundaries, or trusting people.
And beyond relationships, parental alienation can have a whole bunch of other negative consequences.
Yeah, it can affect their self-esteem, their mental health, their academic performance, pretty much every aspect of their lives.
It's like this poison that seeps into everything.
That's a good analogy. These kids often end up feeling guilty and ashamed, like they're somehow responsible for the broken relationship with the targeted parent.
Even though they were manipulated into it.
Exactly. And that guilt can stay with them for years.
And then there's the anger.
Oh, yeah, the anger is huge.
Hmm.
They might be angry at the alienating parent for putting them through this.
And they might even be angry at the targeted parent, believing all the lies they've been told.
Right. It's this tangled web of emotions, and it's incredibly difficult for them to process.
It sounds like these kids are being robbed of their childhood, their innocence, their right to have a loving relationship with both their parents.
Absolutely. And the saddest part is that a lot of people don't even realize this is happening.
They might just think it's normal for kids to take sides after a divorce, but it's not normal when it's this extreme and based on manipulation.
Right. It's important to recognize the signs and get help if you suspect parental alienation is occurring.
Now, we've talked a lot about the impact on the kids, but obviously, this whole situation is incredibly painful for the targeted parent as well.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, imagine being rejected by your own child, being told they hate you, and knowing it's all because of the other parent's lies.
That's got to be devastating.
It is. It's incredibly traumatic. And research shows that targeted parents have higher rates of depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts compared to other parents going through divorce.
It's like they're grieving the loss of their child, even if the child is still alive.
Exactly. And on top of that, they often face disbelief and judgment from others.
People might say, well, you must have done something wrong. Or maybe you just weren't a good parent.
Right. It's like they're being blamed for the situation, even though they're the victim.
And to make matters worse, the alienating parent often tries to isolate them from their support system.
Yeah, they might spread lies to friends and family, trying to turn everyone against the targeted parent.
So the targeted parent ends up feeling alone, rejected, and helpless.
Exactly. It's a really isolating and painful experience.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about how all of this plays out in legal and clinical settings,
Okay.
because this is where things can get really messy, especially when it comes to custody disputes.
Yeah, parental alienation can be a huge factor in custody cases. It's often used to explain why a child is making accusations of abuse against one parent.
So the alienating parent might claim that the child's accusations are proof that the other parent is abusive, when in reality, the child has been coached to say those things.
Exactly. It's a really tricky situation because it can be hard to distinguish between genuine abuse and false allegations stemming from parental alienation.
And the courts have to be so careful not to misinterpret the evidence.
Absolutely. It's a huge responsibility, and there's a lot of room for error. Unfortunately, there have been cases where allegations of abuse have been dismissed in favor of parental alienation claims, leading to kids being placed in the custody of their abuser.
That's terrifying. And what about clinicians? How do they approach parental alienation?
Well, clinicians can assess for parental alienation, but it's complicated by the fact that it's not an official diagnosis in the DSM-5.
So they're kind of navigating uncharted territory.
In a way, yes, but there are guidelines and assessment tools they can use to identify the signs and patterns of behavior.
And are there any legal remedies for parental alienation?
Well, it varies by jurisdiction, but some legal frameworks are being developed to address the issue. For example, some states have laws that try to make up for lost parenting time due to false accusations of abuse or alienation.
So if a parent is proven to have alienated the child, they might face consequences like losing custody or having their visitation time reduced.
Right. And in extreme cases, parental alienation can be considered a form of child abuse, which could lead to even more serious legal repercussions.
It's good to know that there are some legal options available, but it sounds like there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of recognizing and addressing this problem effectively.
Definitely. It requires a multifaceted approach involving education, training, and systemic changes.
And one of the key things is recognizing that parental alienation is a form of abuse.
Absolutely. It's emotional abuse, plain and simple. And it can have just as devastating and long-lasting effects as physical or sexual abuse.
So we need to treat it with the same level of seriousness.
Exactly. We need to protect children from this form of harm.
Well, this has been a really heavy but important conversation.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from defining parental alienation to exploring its devastating impact on children and targeted parents.
And we've touched on some of the legal and clinical challenges surrounding this complex issue.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. Given the profound and often hidden harm of parental alienation, how can we as a society better protect children from this form of abuse? What can we do to raise awareness, improve legal and clinical responses, and support families in navigating separation and co-parenting in healthier ways?
That's a really important question. And it's one that deserves a lot more attention and discussion.
Absolutely. We all have a role to play in protecting children and ensuring their well-being, and understanding parental alienation is a crucial step in that direction.
It's about breaking the silence, challenging harmful behaviors, and advocating for the best interests of children.
So let's keep this conversation going.
Yes, let's.
Thanks for listening.
Thank